day one. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day one of our research week, session 2. This morning we will have an exciting program about climate change. And this is SDG 13 of our SDGs, which is one of our very important SDGs. I just want to start off with a quote. We know climate change is a very hot topic at the moment. So I just want to start off with a quote from Barack Obama. We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it. So hopefully through this session, we can look into ways of how we can mitigate climate change. So our first speaker is Ms. Thandazile, and she will talk to us. She will introduce her topic. Thank you, Ms. Thandazile.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning, everyone. Are you all able to hear me?
I can hear you, Thandazile.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I can't put on my video. Maxine, I think you can do it for me. Thank you so much. Yes, as Prof. Kester has already alluded to the effects of climate change. So my name is Thandazile Sibindi. I'm a doctorate of nursing student in the Department of Nursing under the supervision of Professor Chips and Professor Crowley. So as part of the studies that I'm going to do towards my PhD, I've done my first study on the eco-nursing competencies for nurses, which was a scoping review. So just to give you a brief introduction, climate change has become a significant hazard to global health in the 21st century, and the effects are conspicuous. It causes the deterioration in environmental quality. It exacerbates climate-sensitive diseases, and we're also seeing new epidemics that are taking longer to control. And this has led to the realization that human health and well-being are anchored on the environment. So this global concern, it captures the attention of SDGs 3, which is to ensure healthy lives and to promote well-being, and also the SDG 13, which talks about the urgent need to take action to combat the climate change and its effect. So with this growing impact of climate change, it has then called to the promotion of planetary health through sustainable healthcare and the need to develop the field of eco-nursing. So you realize that the concept of eco-nursing is not new, as it was proposed in the late 1980s, where the individuals and social environment were targeted for health promotion interventions by the public health sector. So in this study, the concept of eco-nursing was adopted to mean the provision of nursing care, taking into cognizance changes in climate and its impact to human health. So the aim of the study, it was to synthesize published literature on eco-nursing roles and competencies for nurses. And the study answered the questions: what are the roles of nurses in climate change? What are the roles of nurses in eco-nursing? And it also answered what competencies, which are inclusive of the attitudes, knowledge, and skills are required by the nurses in the field of eco-nursing. So like I already said, this was a scoping review which used the JBI methodology, and it used the PRISMA reporting format. The protocol for this scoping review was registered with Open Science Journal registration before the full study was embarked on. So that's the registration of the protocol. And for electronic databases, we searched for the articles for any studies that were conducted between the years of 2018 and 2023. And the screening was done in confidence by two independent reviewers. So as also part of the methodology, the studies were looking at professional nurses. They were looking for participants which were professional nurses, and it also included the nurse managers, the nurse educators, or the nursing students. And these studies should have been in the context of hospital setting, clinic, community, or classroom setup. And the studies that were considered had to explore and outline the roles and competencies of nurses in eco-nursing. And it also took into consideration all those studies that were looking at the attitudes, the knowledge and skills, because it was realized that for the nurses to be able to play their role in climate change, they should have certain attitudes and knowledge as well as the skills. And we considered peer review publications, systematic reviews, qualitative reviews, quantitative studies, as well as qualitative designs, which were only written in English. So those are the study findings, the characteristics of the studies. The majority of the studies were done in the period of 2018 to 2020, although the period of 2021 was really showing that more studies were being conducted because the search ended in March 2023. So already in March, between the years of 2021 to 2023, there were already 15, showing that probably by now more have been produced. And the most common setting was the educational setting, with the nursing students being the majority of the participants. And the type of studies mostly were narrative. So under the roles, 5 roles were identified which nurses can play a role in climate change. You realize that these roles are not new, but what stood out is that these roles of nurses in climate change were nested in the roles that are already expected from a general nurse. So these are the roles of advocacy, where there is need for them to advocate for policies that protect the environment and promote the health of vulnerable population. We have the research role, where they need to conduct research so as to practice evidence-based research. Then there is education, where the nurses need to educate themselves, other nurses, as well as health professionals, including the communities, about the climate-sensitive diseases, because of late we're seeing more of these climate-sensitive diseases due to the effects of changes in climate. And there is the role of clinical practice, where the nurses need to be competent in diagnosing, managing, and preventing climate change diseases. And the last role was the leadership, where nurses need to take a leading role in addressing climate change. And also on the findings, remember, I indicated that for the competencies, there has to be related knowledge and attitudes. So for the knowledge on climate change, the nurses are expected to have an understanding in climate science and climate-related health risks for them to be able to address the effects. And there is need to know about the vulnerable populations, because as nurses, we should be in a position to say, for instance, if the weather department gives a warning that there is going to be a heat wave, we should be in a position to identify vulnerable populations. For instance, the elderly and those with chronic non-communicable diseases, they tend to fall under the vulnerable populations from these effects of climate change. And under the knowledge, still there is need to have knowledge on climate change mitigation strategies. And then there are also the related attitudes towards climate change, where they should show concern towards planetary health. So for the eco-nursing competencies, these were divided into general nurses, advanced nurses, and nurse leadership. So for a general nurse, this is someone who has had basic nursing training, and we identified 5 competencies for this basic nurse who will have been certified competent to practice. So they need to show emergency preparedness and response to the effects of climate change. They should have a competence to practice independently, so as to be able to address the impacts of climate change on people. They should be part of leadership, and they should be engaged in community engagement and advocacy. They should be in a position to give patients education about climate change and how they can protect themselves. Then there is also need to take part in research and evidence-based practice. So as general nurses, we cannot expect them really to lead in research, but what is expected of them is to take part in the researches that are conducted. And for the advanced nurse practitioner, in addition to the identified 5 of the general nurses, we have ethical decision-making. So these are the advanced nurse practices who are considered practitioners in their area of specialty. So they should be competent in ethical decision in case of an emergency. They should be involved in, they should have a competence in policy analysis and development, as well as leading research and evidence, so as to promote evidence-based practice. Then for the nurse managers, educators, and researchers, in addition to the competencies of a general nurse, they need to have leadership on the issues that address the effects of climate change and try to find mitigating strategies. And they also need to be involved in community engagement and advocacy. So from the findings, this was what was synthesized. Remember, for the roles, the competencies, they need, for the roles of nurses, they need to have the related knowledge, the attitudes, and the competencies. So for the clinical practice role, it was identified that the nurses need to have knowledge on climate-sensitive diseases and vulnerable populations, as already explained. They need to show attitudes towards commitment to act in addressing the effects of climate change. And for the related eco-competencies, they need to have independent practice competence. They need to have that climate health assessment and resilient care planning. So that also applies to the advocacy role, where there is need to have knowledge in advocacy strategies. So in summary, this study identified the need for clinical practice skills by nurses to diagnose and treat sensitive diseases, and there is need for advocacy skills to protect the vulnerable populations from the effects of climate change. The nurses should give health education on climate change science and climate health related risks. And as part of the conclusion for the study, the eco-nursing field is a neglected area in which nurses have to be equipped on. And the roles of nurses in climate change, they require distinct knowledge, attitudes, and competencies. And the nurses have unique responsibilities in achieving their role in climate change. And the future research should contextualize these roles and competencies in eco-nursing into geographical locations due to their unique disease burden per given location, as well as these contextualized roles should also cater for peculiar health effects brought about by climate change in different areas, because we know that the effects of climate change, they are more severe in the poor, in the underdeveloped countries. Hence, there is need to have these eco-nursing competencies being contextualized to those areas. So I would like to end with this quotation, which says that the world is rapidly changing, and the current generation of health professionals need to understand the impacts of climate change emergency on the health and develop the skills of adaptation and mitigation to promote planetary health. So those are my references. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thandazile, for that excellent presentation. So I have a question, Thandazile. So how do you integrate this the eco health, so the knowledge of the environment into the nursing program? I was just thinking at what level or where do you integrate it into the educational program of nurses?
Okay, thank you for that question. So you realize that the nursing curriculum is already packed. So to have really a dedicated level to integrate this knowledge is going to be nearly impossible. So what is advised is that the information is integrated right from the first year level of training up to the final level of training. So this information is integrated into the modules that are already in existence. For instance, in nurse training, they are being trained about health assessment. So with this eco-nursing that we are trying to incorporate, there is need now to go an extra mile and include the health assessment, which considers the effects of climate change in that individual's health. So each time someone comes to a health center for assistance, then this nurse who will have been equipped about this eco-nursing, they will know that apart from what the patient is presented with, I still need to try and rule out any effects of climate change, which could be the cause of this current condition, because studies are showing that so many people are reporting with climate change related effects due to climate sensitive diseases that we're now experiencing.
Thank you very much. We will have a Q&A session, so all the questions can just be posted in the chat, and Thandazile will have another chance to answer some of your questions. Thank you, Thandazile.
Okay, thank you.
So our next speaker is Mr. Siamtanda Makaza, and he is also from the arts faculty, and he will give us his presentation. You are muted, Siamtanda. You are muted.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for having me. I must just apologize that I'm having a technical issue with my laptop, so I'm using my cell phone to try and navigate through the program. So I will try and share my presentation through a cell phone again, and I hope it won't cause any inconveniences. Let's see. Can you see that? Hello?
I can see it, yes. I can
All
see
right.
it.
Another disclaimer is that I'm not yet done with this particular project. So your comments and questions will help to make it a point that I finalize this project. So my research paper, or rather, let me begin by saying my name is Yamthanda Mkhayisa. I'm currently coming from the Faculty of Arts in the Department of Religion and Theology. And my presentation is, I have elected to entitle it Climate Healing through the Environmental Ethics of the Sabbath. So this paper seeks to investigate whether and to what extent the environmental ethics of the Sabbath lead to climate justice and climate healing. Reflecting on the current ecological crisis characterized by climate change, deforestation, acidification, and so forth, this paper seeks to mirror the Sabbath as hope in the face of the looming ecological crisis. The key terms that I employ in this paper is climate healing, climate justice, environmental ethics, ecology, ecotheology, Sabbath, and rest. So in his seminal text, Ecology and Liberation, Leonardo Boff calls for creation to be understood through what he calls relationality. He argues, for instance, that from an ecological viewpoint, everything that exists coexists, everything that coexists pre-exists, and everything that coexists and pre-exists subsists. He then argues that for an infinite web of all-inclusive relationships, creation ought to be understood through this concept of relationality. So the notion of relationality is also suggestive to the fact that the flourishing of humanity is tied to that of its ecological neighbors. Furthermore, this notion of relationality amplifies the call made by Remose that we have to extend Ubuntu to our ecological counterparts. And this is the main argument that I seek to make in this paper, reversely so, that the looming ecological crisis could be a reflection of our lack of relationality with our ecological neighbors. The question then is, how can this relationality between humanity and the rest of creation be established? As I've said, I have elected to title my paper as follows: Climate Healing through the Environmental Ethics of the Sabbath. To speak of the Sabbath through the environmental ethics, it is a call to theologians, church leaders, and biblical scholars to foster and develop a Sabbath vision that moves beyond anthropocentrism and into a relational way of understanding the biosphere. It may suffice here to explicate that by anthropocentrism, I mean the religious, political, social, and cultural imageries that places humanity on top of every creation. Thus, the ecological problems such as climate change continue to seriously impact the poor and the marginalized community, as well as plants and creaturely life throughout the globe. I therefore argue that it is time for churches, institutions of higher learning, academics, theologians, and leaders of society to reevaluate their ecological commitments. And of course, it is not my intention within this paper to try and define what is meant by ecotheology. Rather, I will offer a brief historiography of ecotheology and how climate change continues to affect us in South Africa today. And secondly, I will turn to the concept of the Sabbath and investigate how the notion of rest speaks to climate healing and relationality amongst creation. And lastly, I will outline steps which I think are necessary in moving forward with the full development of climate healing through the environmental ethics of the Sabbath. And as we know that 2020 to 2030 is a decade of action according to the United Nations. We must therefore be bold in fostering socially engaged theologies that support governments, faith communities, and civil society in their attempts or efforts to end gender, climate, and food injustices. And I think that's the end of this brief abstract. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siyamthanda. That was a very interesting presentation. So all questions will be posted to you in our Q&A. So thank you, Siyamthanda.
Thank you. Just try to stop sharing.
Our next presenter will be Dr. Angela van der Berg. You can take it away, Angela.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Hold on. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right. So good morning, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Dr. Angela van der Berg. I am the director of the Global Environmental Law Center in the Faculty of Law. I'm going to present today on a paper I've actually just submitted to the International Journal of Comparative Constitutional Law. It is a special issue on climate change and the role of the judiciary. So today I'm going to consider climate justice in particular, and the role then of transformative constitutionalism through climate litigation, and looking at what the judiciary is currently doing in our country towards the pursuit of climate justice. But I do welcome any comments or questions. Like I say, the paper is under peer review, and I'm sure I will get comments from the reviewers too. All right, so I don't think it's too necessary to go into detail about the impacts of climate change. It's really well documented. And we all know that climate change is one of the most far-reaching and urgent problems of our future. It impacts almost every SDG and our progress with that. What is interesting to me is that by the mid of 2023, almost 40 or just over 40 countries actually declared climate disasters, covering approximately 1 billion citizens. And at the same time, we're also seeing an increasing unprecedented social mobilization around the issue of climate change, orientated towards raising issues of climate justice. And climate change is often described as the perfect moral storm. This is because the impacts of climate change really disproportionately affect communities and countries that have contributed least to emissions and to the climate problems. So that really means too that climate change is an issue of equity, and it is an issue of justice. And there are many questions surrounding academic debates, not only in law, as to how climate change or climate justice can be pursued, what instruments and mechanisms and platforms are there, and one of these debates does focus on the judiciary. So just some context for the climate justice concept. So it derives from the environmental justice movement, which emerged in the 1970s, which really was concerned about the fair treatment and meaningful engagement or participation of all people, regardless of their race or color or national origin or income, particularly about marginalized non-white communities in America and where they were located in terms of their living environments. So climate justice emerged from that, and it is also concerned with equality. It concerns the unjust distribution of climate change vulnerabilities and impacts, and it's really gained or aimed towards understanding the underlying causes of climate change and then taking actions to address that. So it's a process of reflection, looking at where do injustices exist and why, and then following a process of transformation, looking at systematic changes, looking in particular in the legal context for how laws and policies or governing institutions of powers can be used to destabilize power systems that perpetuate climate injustice. So there are sort of four pillars or characteristics of climate justice. The first one is distributional climate justice. So this concerns the fair and equal distribution of environmental goods and benefits in society, but particularly with the goal to understanding how climate-related harms or risks are experienced and distributed amongst the most vulnerable and marginalized group. Then there is the procedural element, and this is about fairness of process, procedures or laws or regulations. It's about public participation and transparency, and it's making sure that different needs, values, and voices and interests, of course, are brought to the forefront in climate-related decision-making process. Then there is the recognition justice element, which focuses in particular on the recognition of difference as it relates to different needs and values and interests in climate-related decision-making processes. So thinking about how and the extent to which different voices are heard and needs are met, particularly for vulnerable and marginalized groups. Then intergenerational justice, which is something most of us are familiar with. It's more forward-thinking ideas surrounding the recognition of future generations. So the tomorrow of the unborns, our children in the future, and the long-term impacts or consequences of law and political decisions made now on the climate futures for those people. And then a term I'm trying to develop in my own research, which a next paper will be on, and that is on interspecies justice, looking in particular at climate justice between humans and animals, so non-human animals, because humans are nature and intertwined, nature and animals are intertwined, and we really we need to look after nature and animals too. Although I'm still busy developing that theory, and I will put that in a next paper. But if we then consider how transformative constitutionalism might play a role, we need to go back to what this means. So it's really underpinned by the idea of achieving radical change. So the same change envisioned by climate justice in a way. So it's through interpreting the Constitution and the rights in the Constitution in a way that upholds rule of law and promotes equality, human rights, and democracy. So it focuses on substantive equity and justice, but equity here is broader. It focuses on vulnerability, looking at the impact of government decisions on vulnerable groups and uplifting those groups through remedial measures. And then justice, requiring positive action by the state. So going beyond the negative duty paradigm that we really think about, and requiring government to take positive actions to realize the full spectrum of human rights also for vulnerable and marginalized people. It also requires a culture of justification in terms of which every power or aspect of power of government is scrutinized and justified against compliance with human rights standards. And the end goal really of transformative constitutionalism is to transform legal culture. And this really requires a shift in how we understand law, not only laws, but political and legal institutions, one of which is, of course, the judiciary. And it really requires us to use law to steer transformation and change. So if we then look at climate litigation, the mandate of transformative constitutionalism really is to require the judiciary to follow a transformative approach, whereby they interpret the law and constitutional rights in a manner that will steer state action and drive change towards a more just and equal society. So judges here must uphold positive duties imposed by our constitution and international human rights standards on the government to protect human rights, also in the context of climate change. Courts have to reflect on their country's role in leading climate change, and they need to interpret climate responsibilities, also in the domestic context with international climate change law. Judges should then scrutinize government decisions and recall on government to justify their actions. And if they find that government policies or actions are not justified, they need to create remedies for climate justice or climate change with positive duties. So this can what would this look like? This would mean a judge looking at a case and deciding that governments either need to amend their climate laws and policies to reflect stronger climate ambitions, ordering government to implement existing laws in instances where laws exist, for climate change, but they're not exactly implemented, or really ordering the government to develop new climate law and policy. So essentially, it requires judges to take an activist role where government is not doing their part and they're not ambitious enough, and it's leading to climate injustices. So just for context, transformative constitutionalism in South Africa it's really a concept coined in South Africa in around 1998. And the concept really is reflected in the preamble of our constitution. Our constitution speaks about, healing the divisions of our past, establishes society that is open and democratic, and where every citizen enjoys equal rights protected equally by the law. Our constitution is also reflective. It aims to dismantle formal structures to reinforce equality and justice. Our constitution actually requires a culture of justification, and it means that judges must engage with innovative and intellectual practices in terms of which they scrutinize law and policy or government decisions in order to promote human rights and democracy. Courts are also required in terms of Section 39 of our Constitution to consider international law, and they must actually assist with the attainment of domestic political objectives. So South Africa, our judiciary really is well placed to consider climate litigation and to promote climate justice in terms of this constitutional objective of transformative constitutionalism. So I'm going to discuss just briefly 4 cases. I don't have time to go into too much detail, but the first one is the Earthlife case. It concerned the approval of a coal-fired power station in Thabametsi. And here, the issue at hand was whether the National Environmental Management Act, the environmental impact assessment, required a climate impact assessment or not. The minister said it didn't, and they didn't really consider the climate impact. So here, the judiciary scrutinized our existing environmental legislation and actually read in climate obligations for environmental impact assessments. And they said that we need to take a purposive reading of the Act. And the judge said that the Act does establish an obligation for government to consider the climate impacts. And it actually extended the definitions of NEMA. And the court gave guidelines on what a climate impact assessment would entail. The court focused really strongly on South Africa's climate commitments in the international context, looking at the international climate change law, particularly the Paris Agreement. And the court really said that if we're approving coal-fired power stations without looking at the impacts on future generations, we're missing the mark, and we cannot continue to do this. So the court really interpreted our legislative framework in a way that focuses on intergenerational justice, so the future impacts of climate change. And this case brought on legal reform, which is the whole point of transformative constitutionalism. After the judgment, the minister released national guidelines for the consideration of climate impacts in EIA. So this really was a positive result. Then following that case, there was the Trustees for Groundwork case. This was also for a coal-fired power station, but this case took place in the Water Tribunal. And the question before the court was whether the National Water Act, in the granting of a water use license, the minister should at all consider climate change impacts of development. And the case succeeded. So this is transformative in the sense that the Water Tribunal doesn't typically have the authority to look at cases that deal with the energy sector or air quality or mining. However, this was for water use license and it was allowed. The tribunal looked at the National Water Act and read in climate obligations for government. And it was interesting that they looked at the impacts of climate change on water security, but also in the future. So the court here said they actually referenced the principle of intergenerational equity and cautioned that the coal-fired power plant could lead to groundwater pollution in the long term, even if it is 100 years from now. And actually highlighted that the minister must ensure that water is used and protected in terms of sustainable and in an equitable manner for all future generations in accordance with our constitutional mandate. So here again, the Water Tribunal focused on transformative climate justice, but this also strengthens the recognition justice element of climate change. What is regrettable about this case is that a large part of the facts really did relate to the water pollution and how it would impact disadvantaged communities. And the tribunal unfortunately said that while there is a need to redress the results of our past racial order, this is not as relevant as the other climate change factors. So this really is a missed opportunity of the tribunal here to strengthen the distributional aspect and the recognition aspect of climate justice. So yeah, this one is a hit and miss, I would say. Then the next case is the seismic blasting case. Everyone knows that case. It was in I think in the Eastern Cape, where Shell wanted to do a seismic blast in the ocean. And the communities approached the court for an interdict, basically because it said that they didn't consider the impacts of climate change on the fishing stocks, but also on the cultural and indigenous communities' practices with fishing in the area. The court actually looked at the public participation processes. So this is the procedural aspect of climate justice, and said that Shell didn't take any meaningful public participation, and the minister should have caught this when they approved or wanted to approve the seismic blasting. So here, the court criticized the measures followed for public participation and strengthened the recognition and procedural elements of climate justice. The court also looked, however, at the distributional and intergenerational aspects of climate justice, because it said that allowing the seismic blast would be inconsistent with the country's domestic and international climate change commitments in terms of their fair share, so equitable global contributions to greenhouse gases. Very interesting about this case is the focus here on representation of indigenous communities. So that's the recognition justice element. Then the final case is the Groundwork Trust case, the Deadly Air case. So this wasn't a climate change case per se, but it was about the lack of regulations for air quality in the Fall Triangle. And the court actually linked it to climate change here, linking air quality and air pollution to climate change, and the failure of the government 12 years later to really develop regulations for the Fall Driehoek and to implement them. And really what stood out about this case is the court emphasized intergenerational justice and said that climate change necessitates the rejection of short-termism in government policies, and it requires the state to consider the long-term impact of pollution on future generations, also in the context of climate change. And here, the court actually looked at poor air quality and climate change of previously disadvantaged communities, and it said that it falls disproportionately on the shoulders of marginalized communities, so strengthening the recognition justice element of climate change. It also ordered the government to develop new climate law and policy or regulation for that area. And it said that as the court, it is allowed to do so. So I know I'm running out of time. I'll make this quick. I think that the cases demonstrate that our courts really are committed and attuned to our political commitments for climate change. And they are tuned to holding government accountable for our political commitments, also in terms of climate justice. It seems that the courts are focusing more on intergenerational climate justice and some procedural elements of climate justice, but it really is encouraging to see the seismic blast case where our courts are considering the recognition elements in terms of indigenous cultures. So I really think that such judgments can assist in the progressive and principled development of climate law and policies. And it also creates legal precedents that builds a common law for the environment, as evidenced by all four judgments. So we would say that the judiciary has taken a leadership role in the absence of dedicated climate change law and policies, or where such laws are ambiguous. And then finally, the judgments really impact the distributional aspects of climate justice. Here and there, it's a hit and miss, but overall, I'd say it's positive. What I want to end with is that while the courts can be lauded for their commitments to addressing climate change, it should be noticed that widespread and systematic transformation, as envisioned with the concept of transformative constitutionalism, is beyond the powers of the courts alone. So only when judicial commitment is coupled with legislative reform and responsive and dedicated government action and decision-making can vast disparities and injustices that continue to exist be eradicated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that very interesting presentation. So Q&A later. So the next presenter will be Dr. Patrick O'Farrell from the Biodiversity and Conservation Policy Department. Take it away, Patrick.
Thanks, Prof. Geister. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much to all the earlier speakers. You know, I had wondered myself why I was in a climate change presentation session, but all the speakers so far have really talked about this triple planetary challenge that we have, which deals with massive biodiversity loss, climate change impacts, and then pollution, both air and water and land pollution. And this is very much the focus of this presentation too, where I try to consider the diverse values of nature and kind of where I go from this is to talk about biodiversity in nature. I see biodiversity as the structure and the functioning of our ecosystems, and these are ultimately fundamental, and they underpin all life on land and life in water. And these are directly connected up to the next level of SDGs, which we see, which is about our climate action. They help regulate our climate. Not only that, but they help feed people and keep them healthy as well. And they also provide clean water for sanitation. So, you know, biodiversity and how much importance we place on it has a critical role in not only those 6 SDGs, but I think the others too are underpinned by it, although it's less well understood. We can debate that later. Yeah, so where I go with this is that, well, for probably the last 5 years, I've been involved in something which has been called the International Governmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Now, this is the biodiversity equivalent, and that sits parallel to the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, and they do assessments on all sorts of issues related to biodiversity. And for the last 5 years, I've been involved with the platform that has been looking at the value of nature and the assessment of the value of nature. What we've tried to do with this assessment, which was completed last year, was to unpack the diverse conceptualizations of nature, how people see nature and understand nature and what it means to them, as well as how do we assess it, how do we develop methods, what methods are out there for actually determining the value people hold for it, what are the approaches that we can use in distilling this information. Also had to highlight the different decision-making processes around value and where value slots into how we make decisions, how we make laws, speaking to some of Angela's issues that she's just raised, as well as also how do we push towards the roles of value and shifting towards more just and sustainable futures. So I think that links up with the previous 3 speakers. Okay, so this big assessment that took place, just to kind of give you some context to this, is that there were about 96 experts from 45 different countries that got together. Not only was 98 experts, at least they weren't enough, so we roped in another 200 people to be contributing authors to this assessment. Over 4 years, we sat down and we reviewed 50,000 scientific publications, documents, policies, and even indigenous and local knowledge sources were scrutinized. And this, you know, was all added up, and it took about 18 or 19 years to prepare, 19 years of time to prepare this document. Obviously, this is a lot of work, and I can't go into all of it. So what I've tried to just do is just simply distill 7 key messages or key findings that came out of this this entire massive assessment and body of work. This information is available within that document, that best value assessment, and you can just simply Google it. It's also been published recently in the last month in a Nature paper that you can find online too. So jumping into the key findings. So this big assessment really spoke to the first issue was that the causes of our global biodiversity crisis and the opportunities to address them are tightly linked to the way nature is valued in political and economic decisions. So this isn't big news to us, but it really speaks to, you know, the linking between the crisis and the way we conduct ourselves, both politically and economically, and ultimately unsustainable human appropriation of nature is being due to these dominant political and economic decisions. And that becomes quite clear when you review so many documents. The second key finding I want to bring to your kind of attention is that despite the diversity of nature's values, policy making has privileged a very narrow set of values for nature. You know, and these have really been values that are reflected in marketplaces, and they're prioritized in terms of monetary values of nature, or otherwise they're those that are linked to biodiversity, where communities, or at least should I say conservation areas, have been created, you know, for the intrinsic value of a species or a particular ecosystem as such. And those really are the only two aspects that have really been considered in terms of policy making around value. One of the key outcomes of the study was really to try and recognize the diversity of nature's values. And in doing so, we developed a detailed typology of what this all means. Hopefully on your screen, you can see something of a figure which demonstrates that our values and our understanding and our links to nature are at multiple different levels. First of all, we all have different world views and knowledge systems that are foundational in the way we see the world. And these world views really basically speak to how we conceive things. They speak to the values of our anthropocentric values, our biocentric values, and they even speak to kind of issues of pluralism, where we don't just think about ourselves. They also speak to kind of these broad knowledge and practices and beliefs that we hold. So here today we're speaking a lot about academic beliefs, but they're indigenous beliefs and they're local beliefs too, and they're all captured here at this very first level. We also have broad values, which are ultimately what we consider to be the guiding principles of life. And these types of values speak to the notions of freedom, health, justice. We've heard all about those already. Livelihoods, recognition of ourselves, our self-esteem, and even security issues. So these are the things we strive for in our daily lives too, being very broad values. But then we also get onto specific values, and this is where really we start to see how we start to interact more clearly with nature. And some of the specific values that we hold for nature and nature's contributions to people are instrumental values, and this speaks to, you know, the benefits that we get from nature. So these would be like fishing. We can go out and fish and we get a fish, and we can eat a fish. So this is an instrumental value. Also intrinsic values, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the belief that species themselves have a right to exist, you know, why we create reserves and protected areas, because we know that species have a value for themselves, in themselves. And then third aspect of specific values speaks to this notion of relationship values, or should I say relational values, which speaks to our attachment to place. It's a meaningful relationship we have with different species or with different environments or different landscapes, and so on and so forth. And it speaks to our responsibility for those too. So the idea is to, when we see how all these different values can be stacked up in what is on the right-hand side of the figure, what is our value life frames, where we can collect these, we can group these in multiple different ways. We see people throughout the world, you know, taking more or less from one of these components and adding them up to create these different strategies that we have for moving forward with life. But in terms of the policy space, it's about recognizing that there are many different values. And if we start to work through typologies such as this, we can see that there's a richness to people's relationships with nature. So we have that. We can see it's not all just about price and value. So this broad scale assessment, as I said, one of the key issues was to identify what methods are out there. So often people say, oh, we'll just do a cost benefit analysis. Well, no, let's not just do that. Let's just think about all the other methods that are available to us for understanding the nature value, or the value of nature, should I say. This assessment identified that there are well over 50 valuation methods that are well known, that are out there, and that people are using only to a smaller or lesser degree. These 50 valuation methods cluster into quite neatly into 4 different valuation method families. And don't have the time to kind of go into each one of these, but let me just highlight what they are. So the first method family speaks to nature-based valuation. And these are typically measurement units around how many tons of fish we can extract, or how much forest is available to us, an area measurement. So it's about nature's physical ecological components. Then we get something called statement-based valuation, where we really assess what people say when they're asked about the importance of nature. The third one is around behavioral-based valuation, where we watch and see what people do and how they interact with nature. We can assess that from their behavior. And the fourth one really is this integrated value, where we may look to provide information around support for decision making. And it's an integrated way where people may prioritize different approaches and integrate multiple of these different values together into an integrated outcome. So there are lots of methods out there that can be applied. There's no excuses for not actually engaging with value. The fifth one is really about the valuation process. And this is to say that there are different, we should follow valuation processes, and we can tailor make these to better represent all these different values in policy and decision making, in supporting sustainability within different contexts. And so what this is saying is that we don't have excuse not to engage with this diversity of value, and we don't have an excuse for leaving other people's values out of the decision-making process. I haven't got time to kind of go into each one of these different steps, but ultimately what it does and what this valuation process takes us through is that it's an interactive process. It speaks to understanding the relevance and the resources and the robustness that we have and desire within a decision-making context. And it speaks to taking kind of participants with us through the process, where we, with them, identify what's important to them and carry their values through into the final point of decision-making, where we communicate the results and we inform people around the decision. So, and it can be tailored to all different contexts and valuation processes, should I say. So we can refine processes to do better. The sixth point that I've got really speaks to what is a very scary fact. And what we found was that less than 5% of published valuation studies, studies that have actually gone out there and measured people's values for nature, have seen a policy uptake. So they haven't actually had an effect. So 95% of all the work that we've done in terms of the nature valuation space has gone unnoticed, and this has absolutely no impact. What you see on the right is a diagram which speaks to where and how potentially we can start to feed in valuation work into kind of policy and decision makings. And we can use our information to inform decision makers at different points in this policy cycle to help them decide, as well as help them to design policy. And you can see in the middle, we've got stakeholders and all our different points at which we could put value into the design or into the information sessions, which speaks to each point in the decision or policy making cycle, which is about setting agendas, it's about policy formulation, policy adoption, policy implementation, and then even policy reevaluation. So there are many places where we can actually insert policy or valuation into our policy decision-making spaces. So these need to be, our policy decision-making processes need to be reformed through appropriate intervention points, and hopefully this can drive institutional change. And by institutional change, I mean to that legal space as well. And the final point really here is that if we are to move towards transformed society, which is much more sustainable and it is much more just into the future, we need to do multiple of these things. So what you see in this figure is really how we go about shifting, should I say, applying leverage to making changes within our society and within our institutions. Each of these different arrows, or the first 3 arrows, speak to those issues that I've spoken to already, where we need to recognize the values. We need to meaningfully include diverse values in decision making. We need to enhance our institutions to embrace this diversity of value. And then this final kind of orange lever, which really gives us the kind of greatest leverage in moving down, is really about mobilizing sustainability aligned values and driving development paradigms. So shifting towards more sustainability aligned values and social norms and goals. So this is about revolutionizing our societies and driving change. This is something that Prof. Phillips and Prof. France this morning were calling us to do. And I again think that the three speakers before that were hinting at this aspect too. So we need a whole lot of capacity to do this. And I think this conference and some of the talks I've already seen are making suggestions in this space. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It was a very interesting presentation. I did see the Nature paper. Well done, congratulations. So we will now move on to Mr. Ryan Bird.
Good morning, everybody. Prof. Keist, are you able to see my presentation?
Not yet, Ryan.
All right. Is it all good now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Right, perfect. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good weekend. I know I had a good weekend, actually. I hope everybody's having a good Monday. It's been a good Monday since, I'd say, 4 years. So congratulations to all the South Africans. It's all our victories. So today I'll be speaking about a collaborative project, and it's in collaboration with a few universities, and my master's project is part of this wider project that we are trying to achieve. So my name is Ryan Bird, and I'm from the Department of Biotechnology, and I'm representing a lab named IMBM. So today we'll be speaking about UWC as a carbon sequestration solution. So UWC, for those that don't know, it's an Afrikaans word for small hills. And if you have a look at our picture over here, those little pink circles scattered all over the field, those are suspected UWCs. So you can think of them as concentrations of like high concentration nutrients. This picture was actually taken near the end of the Namakwaland flower bloom. So lots of the flowers had disappeared already. And as you can see, there are still flowers left, and those are suspected to be the ones that have high access to concentrations of nutrients. So let's move on. Let's do a little bit more definitions. So carbon sequestration. So in the context of our project, it's basically removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it away in soil. So as it's widely known, if you have got carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it can act as a greenhouse gas. And we know that that can lead to a greenhouse effect, which leads to climate change. So this is quite an interesting theory, I'd say. Maybe we can move that carbon dioxide out of the air and into the soil in a more stable way, less harmful. So if you have a look at our little diagram on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side, sorry, you don't have to know this flow chart or go through it word for word. What I really want to emphasize is that the photosynthesis goes into trees. Well, through photosynthesis, carbon dioxide goes into trees. It can be stored as a compound known as calcium oxalate. So CaOX. So I'll just say oxalate for the rest of this presentation. This oxalate is used by microbes, so like bacteria and fungus. So very minuscule organisms are able to use this oxalate, and through this utilization, they are able to convert oxalate into a compound known as calcium carbonate, which I'll call calcite for the rest of the presentation. And that is a stable form of holding your carbon in soil. So it goes from the air into trees and stored in the soil. And that is how the carbon is stored away from the atmosphere. Our middle picture over here and our left-hand picture over here, very, very interesting. We are actually looking at termites. So the Yvelkes are made by termites, and these termites can work on these mounds or these Yvelkes for many, many years, from 50, 60 years, and there are some Yvelkes that are thousands of years old. So this is the specific ecosystem that we are looking at in terms of this conversion. So this ecosystem, it's known as the oxalate carbonate pathway, but we will call it the OCP. So just a breakdown of how that OCP works. So carbon dioxide moves into oxalate, and then it moves into calcite, where it can remain in the soil. So the major problem that we are facing is that the native ecosystems, or the Yvelkes, are they're basically being disturbed by methods that farmers and land users are utilizing to make money. So through grazing and agriculture, these Yvelkes are being disturbed. And we want to know whether this disturbance will lead to a loss of biodiversity in these ecosystems, or whether it's not really playing any role. Maybe we can have both Yvelkes and cash crops on the same land. So this is quite important because we want to find out, are there other ways that farmers or landowners can be rewarded for maintaining their biodiversity? So if we can answer questions like that, it could be really interesting because it's not often that you can retain biodiversity as well as capitalize on political and economic benefits. But we feel like there could be a way that we can do this. So, like I said, we are focusing on the ecosystem of termites, and there are ranges of different mounds, Yvelkes, throughout South Africa. On a recent trip, I found, well, these are just pictures of 4 completely different types of mounds. You get these conical ones, and then you get these wide ones that are as big as a bakkie, or as tall as a bakkie. And our focus is on these bigger ones in the top right corner, these longer ones, and this type of termite that is known as the Cape harvester termite. And that is in contrast with the snouted termite, which is found more northern. They don't have a lot of OCP happening in their mounds. So the location that our research is centering around is a little, I wouldn't even say a town, it's more like a hamlet. It's known as Koringberg, and that is about an hour and a half from Cape Town. The Swartland, Koringberg forms part of the Swartland region, and it is a semi-arid region, and we found that it is a good way to look at the OCP because firstly, it hasn't been done before. Lots of OCP research has been done in forests and jungles. So it would be interesting to see how that differs in a semi-arid climate. And just having an awesome look at this picture, Koringberg, it means Corn Mountain. We picked this location because it has both pristine, so untouched fynbos, renosterbos area right next to a cultivated area where they're growing oats and other cash crops. The interesting thing is we've got Yvelkes on both sides. So on this side, there'll be Yvelkes, and on that side. So moving towards that question where we can maybe answer whether there are changes between the 2 types of Yvelkes. So from an aerial view, You get your cultivated and your pristine. So the key questions in terms of our project is we want to find out where this oxalate came from. So what I showed you in the beginning is theorized, and it has been reported like this in other areas like jungles and what have you. But we want to find out if that oxalate is coming from the surrounding vegetation or from somewhere else, maybe from the sea. We want to find out which microbes, so the bacteria and fungi, are involved in that conversion, the important conversion. We want to know what mechanisms that these bacteria and fungi are using. We also want to know how the oxalate and the calcite levels are changing over time and how that changes with the population of microbes and termites as well. And then, of course, like I said, we want to know how land use changes the impact. And we want to know if this ecosystem knowledge that we are gaining can be transferred to other biomes that also have high calcite and high oxalate levels, which we suspect has that oxalate carbonate pathway. So as you can hear, that's quite a few pictures, I mean, quite a few questions, broad scope of questions. Surely not one person can answer all of them. So we're trying to make this dream of understanding this ecosystem work. And to do that, we need many, many heads, many experts in the field in order to get a holistic idea. And putting those pieces together to get those holistic idea of this ecosystem. So in order to actually take advantage and understand this ecosystem, we need to understand different parts of it. So these are the universities involved in our microbiology section. So looking at the fungi and the bacteria. So University of Western Cape, of course, my project, and then the University of Pretoria that will look at metagenomics. So briefly, metagenomics is just looking at all the organisms. They look at the DNA of all the organisms in the Yivulki. And that will become a bit important in a few slides. Just hold on to that thought. Stellenbosch as well, they're also looking at the fungus part of our project. Then we've got Stellenbosch as well, Kent State University and the University of Texas from America. They are looking at geology, earth sciences, and soil sciences. So they're interested in the chemistry that's happening in these termite mounds, these Yivulkis. They're also looking at changes in the rock formations. There's many layers when it comes to opening a Yivulki. So as you can see, we're getting ideas from both the biotic and the abiotic parts of this ecosystem to get a good idea. And then Nelson Mandela University, they have a professor on that side that specializes in speckworm ecosystems. And like I said, it's showing similar results to our ecosystem. So once we get our ducks in a row and make a blueprint of our knowledge, we want to find out if this can be applied to other ecosystems or maybe completely other biomes as well. So that's what everybody's doing. What are we actually doing at UWC? So I am from the Department of Biotechnology. So we are looking at the microbes, especially the ones that can be grown. So I'm trying to find out whether these bacteria are using a classical pathway to use this oxalate, or if it's something new that is being done. And in order to find these, to answer these questions, I need the physical bacteria in order to have tests being done on them. So in a nutshell, I want to find out who is there and what are you capable of. All right, so in literature, there's been 2 genes. So genes code for different characteristics in an organism. So we give them names, short names, just so that we can understand them. So FRC and OXC are part of a classical pathway that does this neat conversion of oxalate, or rather it uses the oxalate in this way. So when it comes to microbiology, you get the cultivable side, and it's interesting because only less than 1% of bacteria from a given area can actually be grown in lab conditions. So why actually focus on this? Because the University of Pretoria are doing metagenomics, which is close to 100% or way bigger than 1%. Maybe they get between 70 and 90% of an idea of all the bacteria. But that's just identification. My prerogative is actually I'm trying to do tests to find out what these bacteria do. And you can't really do that using a computer only. I need to take this physical bacteria and conduct tests on them. So what does that actually entail? It entails sampling, so getting soil, culturing, taking the bacteria out of the soil, growing it in the lab. Then I'm going to detect. So I want to see if they actually used the oxalate. And then identify is where we give them a name. And then from there, I'll do the tests to see what and how well do they utilize the oxalate. So sampling. So this is just, we went to Korenberg, we dug up some of the soil, and these holes over here is where we sampled different layers. That's just a picture of me in the bottom corner in the digging trench. Culturing, so this is where you grow your bacteria, and that was over 4 weeks. These are pictures of my most handsome bacteria. These are collections of millions. Like in a small dot like that, you can get millions of bacteria. And then I tried to detect them. So I used an enzyme kit or assay or a tester. And those that did not use the oxalate, basically their concentrations of oxalate did not go down. And when they were positive, they did go down. Right, and this is just a picture of a work in progress. I'm trying to identify the names. So we ID them by using a sequencer. We look at their DNA, and then we give them names. From here, I've got the names now. Once I finalize and choose candidates, I will do these growth studies, utilization studies. So what does this all mean? Just in conclusion. So once I am able to give my ideas or what I found, my findings, and we put all our information together, the geologists, the microbiologists, everybody, we can get a holistic view. And this is the responsibility, the impact and sustainability. So socially, we all have a responsibility to move towards climate change solutions. So I believe this project is definitely in that direction. In terms of global impact, ecosystem understanding such as this can, obviously you can give knowledge to other labs and they can have a look at their specific biomes and how it compares. But also you can fall into favor in the eye of the international community, especially when it comes to coming up with something new. And then finally, at the local level, we want to find out if landowners can actually still be enumerated for using their land as yiveltjies for taking carbon dioxide out of the air instead of being used as cash crops, which is generally being used. So a different way of getting money, but still still moving towards that climate change goal. Right. So just some acknowledgements. My supervisor, my supervisors, UWC, NRF for the finance, and all my collaborators. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for your interesting presentation. So I've been checking the chat because now we're going to go to the Q&A because we need to close the session, the first session on climate change. So I didn't see any questions in the Q&A as yet. But Ryan, since you are the last speaker, I have a question for you. So in your case, if you do find high release of carbon dioxide, is it a bad thing in your case, or is it a good thing, like in the soil?
So for us, it would be a good thing because this concentration of carbon can be used by other organisms. And by bringing more organisms towards the Yivulki, you can have a higher biodiversity, and those organisms bring their own nutrients in order to make that system and make it keep going. So in our case, having more calcite is a good sign generally.
Okay. And then with the termites, is there a molecular approach to identify maybe other termites also that are coming in and out? Maybe a molecular approach for them as well.
So it's not within the scope of this project, whereby we are focusing on the termites and their metagenome. But we have chosen an area whereby there's only one species of termite in the area that we are aware of. So in that way, we can at least isolate our Cape Harvester termites as the main actors in bringing the nutrients from the plants into the Yivulkis.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
You're welcome.
So I also have a question for Thandazile. So the impact of COVID on your study, because your years overlapped with the COVID period. So did you see any impact of COVID on your outcomes, Thandazile?
Yes, thank you for that question. I'm not sure if I'm getting the question properly. Is the person asking if my results are influenced by the effects of COVID, or has COVID affected my results?
Yeah, the impact of COVID on your outcomes, yes.
Okay, I can't really say COVID has had an impact or hasn't had an impact to my results, because studies are still ongoing about these climate sensitive diseases. Yes, we may say that COVID can be attributed to climate change, but there hasn't been solid evidence to support that. They are just assumptions as of now. So I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you for that. Then Siamtanda, the method of spreading knowledge about climate change from, I'm just thinking, from a pulpit. Do you think that the pastors are doing enough in that regard to spread the word? I mean, the word about climate change.
Thank you so much, Prof. I don't think they are doing much. And part of the reason why they are not doing much, it is simply because majority of pastors, they don't see the earth as their home. Rather, they see it as a place in which they will have to escape, you know, and all of those escapist eschatologies wherein they just want to go to heaven, which they perceive as their hope. And that is why Christianity as a whole plays a huge role in the current ecological problems that we are facing, because they do not see the earth as the home that God has given us. That is why Christians, majority of Christians, they do not care about the earth. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tanda. Angela, you mentioned something about your research on the animal side, but you said you will talk about that later. Can you just briefly summarize on where you're going with the work on the animal side?
Yes, so there is an emergence now within the animal welfare, animal rights law debate, whether animals should be granted rights. So there was the rights of nature movement, but animals are not necessarily seen as individuals. When we speak about rights of nature, we speak about rights of rivers, rights of ecosystem, rights of trees. So there's an animal rights movement, and within that movement, there is questions now about the impacts of climate change on animals, with, you know, diminishing ecosystems, food security, multiple species dying out, and most of that attributed to humans and human actions. So questions surrounding justice is now evolving to justice between species, humans as a species and animals as a species, and what does that mean? What does that mean for law, and what does that mean for future legal and political decision making? So my research is going to also now focus on, if we're constitutionalizing rights for animals, not only nature, what does that mean for law and policy development in the future in the context of climate justice?
Thank you very much, Angela. Clearly answered my question. There is another question for Tanda in the chat. Tanda, the question is, I wish to understand the correlation between rest and climate healing. The question is addressed to you. I wish to understand the correlation between rest and climate healing.
Thank you so much for that question. Well, the correlation or the congruence between rest and climate healing rests on the idea that if the earth, just like our human bodies, can be given the rest that it needs, then there is a high probability that all ecological problems might at least find healing. Within the context, perhaps, of Christianity, there are specific days which are deemed to be the Sabbath. But in those particular days, when Christians go to church, for example, they would go using cars, etc., and so forth. But if they were to walk to church, for instance, that could contribute to perhaps healing the planet in a much more better way. Just imagine every Saturday or every Sunday, there are no cars that are used. People are just walking and interacting with nature in a much more relational way. I think that could perhaps bring about a healing to the climate. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tanda. Patrick, to wrap up. So in that publication, there's obviously big data that came from the global north, and the contribution from there. But how can we improve the data that comes from the global south? In your opinion, you are muted, Patrick. You are muted.
So much. That's a very good question. This is something that we constantly face challenges within the global south. I think even the AI speaker earlier alluded to the fact that what the information that's available is predominantly information from the global north, and that's a constant battle. So even if you're using an AI approach, you're going to get a northern bias. The one of the key ways that this has incorporated information from Global South was that the people and the experts that were selected to undertake these broad-scale reviews by this international platform always incorporated, if not more Global South people, and equal spread of Global South people, and always had good gender bias. In fact, it was always more favored in terms of women in science and in being represented than not. So I think, careful planning is critically important. I think the fact that people from the Global South were so strongly involved and funded for their participation, as opposed to people in the Global North who actually had to find their own funding to participate, made a huge difference. So that alleviated the economic pressure. I think by doing so, Global South scientists were able to bring their case studies to the table, which potentially have been neglected by people typically writing from the Global North, where they were dismissed because they'd probably be published in lesser journals or not published at all. So there was that personal interaction which allowed for our data to kind of emerge in the space. The only way we're going to start to turn it around too is by having research days like this, and to ensuring that our young scientists and our postgraduates are actually publishing. So, I think this is really something that I'm really excited about within UWC, is strive and this push to kind of boost our publication numbers, because I think we've got great work and we've got great opportunities here, and to see it in online and available for the world to see is really, really important. So by shifting there, I think we can make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Just to close that session now, there's just to add on to what Patrick was saying, there's a clear link between all of the speakers today, so I think it's high time that we do take the climate story a bit more serious, and maybe it is a time to take it to a more physical meeting, and to then get people in to give presentations such as this, because this was a very interesting session. And just to close that session, I'm a man of quotes, and so there's a comment from Angela. I'm keen to collaborate with the speakers today, which is very, very. It's what I was just saying. So even a wounded world is feeding us. This is the quote. Even a wounded world holds us and giving us our moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. So this is the quote from Robin Wall Kinmere. So I think it's very important that we take this further, Prof Phillips and the other officials. And I think we should maybe have a session on climate, and maybe schedule that somewhere on our campus, and have speakers coming in, because this was a very great, very good session. So thank you to all the speakers from the session, and for sticking to time. We will now move to the second theme, which is education for sustainable development, which follows on to the session of climate change. And the first speaker is Mr. Mzwandile Menziwa. Mzwandile.
Good morning, Prof. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, yes, Prof. Thank you very much for the opportunity that I can be able to present my study in. I still have a proposal here. It's already been accepted by the university, so I'm happy I could present it, because I feel like it is linked with the SDG 3 and education and the good health and well-being. So I have been prepared to whatever. Yeah, sorry. Share. Oh no. I want to share with you my slides. I don't know if you can see my slides, but it's the title of my project is the
I can't see. I can't see it. I can't see it.
Okay, let me share with you. Share screen. Windows. Okay, come back. Cancel this one and then. Window entire screen. No. This is it. Okay. Can you see now? Can you see it now?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Oh, this is my title of my study, the feasibility of applying the Genesis School Health Index scorecard to enhance interprofessional collaboration between learner health and well-being in rural district in the Western Cape, Republic of South Africa. It's me who's presenting it, Mzwandile Menziwa. This is my student number, and these are my supervisors. This is my supervisors, Professor Fituza Vahi and Professor Ansi Kitchen. The problem here, the research problem to investigate the feasibility of applying Genesis School Health Index scorecard is the limited availability of instruments that teachers can use to identify and address the learner health and well-being challenges in their school. This study attempted to address these related problems with the implementation of school health policy. The feasibility of the Genesis School Health Index scorecard has been developed based from the School Health Index, which was developed by CDC, Center for Disease Prevention and Control in US. And then in 2016, based on that document, Dr. Karen Daniels from UWC to in limited instrument that teachers can apply to establish or identify or address the learner health and well-being challenges. However, when she developed the tool, she early childhood development phase 1 and 2. So has it been so this study of applying it with all the learners in school grades, and to determine if the Genesis school can be successful in all grades and for its fair share in public arena, meaning that because it hasn't been in public arena, but it's related to well documented health promoting schools, like action areas of learner health promotion and other document policies which are well established, like integrated school health policy, as well as the one in the Southern African countries, care and support of teaching and learning. This is the problem we have to I have to address in this study is to establish the feasibility of applying with all learners in school. And also the research problem based like related to the implementation of school health policy, as I already mentioned here in the initially, like the study attempt to address the related factors with the implementation of school health policy. The lack of implementation of school policy is always related to various factors. For example, the one which are attached here, which is reflected to rural school teachers' experience and limited success to cap the learner needs, increasing learner needs. So these are the attached factors, related factors with the lack of implementation of school health. However, these factors may have to be confirmed with the participant. And I already noted here, there's always in the literature no clarity for strategies to execute this integrated school health policy program, meaning the school management and the lack of skills for health promotion and lack of training for teachers, especially teachers in remote areas. So there also has been limited collaboration, if any, with teachers and health professionals. These are the gaps which can be identified with the Western Cape Education Department and the schools. And so on, like lack of resources, high failure rate in schools, which highlight the discrepancy, like for quality education, as the studies also have to reflect quality education, which is the sustainable development goal for 2030, number 4. Teacher ignorance, maybe they are not interested in certain training, practicality, logistic, the reason for remote areas, the challenges include the transport or delays for support services. These are the problems linked to the implementation of school health policy. And then these can be reviewed further and will be validated with the teachers during the research methodology. The aim of this study is to explore the feasibility of applying Genesis School Health Index scorecard to enhance interprofessional collaboration between teachers and school health for the promotion of learner health and well-being in rural districts in the Western Cape Province, South Africa. These are the objectives, is to explore teachers' perception of training aimed to development of their capacity to apply Genesis School Health Index scorecard to gain insight into learner health and well-being. Is to describe the application of the Genesis School Health Index scorecard tool to assess the health and well-being of all grades in primary school. Is to explore the value of Genesis School Health for development of strategy for collaboration on learner health and well-being. All these objectives, they center on learner and well-being and health and academic well-being, as well as their development.
3 minutes
The
left,
research.
Mwandile. 3 minutes.
3 minutes left. Okay. This is the research question. The research question: what is the feasibility of applying the school health index scorecard to enhance the interprofessional collaboration between teachers and school health professionals on the promotion of the health of learner health and well-being in schools? So furthermore is the subsidiary research questions which are attached to the main question and to the objectives, as well as to the aim. This study is informed by health promoting school, of which is with action areas for school health policies, safety and supportive learning setting, encouraging community action and support, provide life skill education and enabling mechanism to support and benefit the entire learning community. Yeah, the motivation for focusing on learner well-being and the important role that teachers can play has been underpinned by the health promoting school initiative adopted in South Africa since 1994. This is the picture of the school health index scorecard here. So in school health index scorecard is divided with these elements: cognitive functioning, social functioning, emotionally functioning, and school functioning. So the teachers have to assess the learners based on this document, and they can be able to make an improvement plan and to either refer the learners in need, or they can also use it for their own improvement for school communities. This is the continuation of Genesis School Health. It is a tool that is used to assess the health of school community. It's been developed by Dr. Karen Daniels, and this study is keen to explore the perceived feasibility of applying this tool. Interprofessional collaboration is part of the literature reviewed, because the interprofessional collaboration ensures the improved health services to the population. Here, the population can be at the schools, and then the multi-sectoral response to address children's well-being, like care and support of teaching and learning, integrated school health policy, working partnership of interprofessional team with teachers in primary school is relevant, as learners spend most of their time in school, making it an ideal place to promote academic attainment and health development, which goes back to both the SDG 3 and 4. This part also speak to those two sustainable development goals. But the challenges among the learners in school is not only for teachers, but also for other professionals that can be able to assist with these challenges. The theoretical framework which the study is employed or pertinent to this study is the grounded theory methodology, which was developed by Glaser and Strauss in 1960. This allows for data collection and analysis of data to develop the theories, to make sense of people's action. So the theory here is I'm not gonna prove a certain theory, but a theory will emerge from the data collected of after analysis of this data collected. And the purpose for using this grounded theory is because there was no existing single theory that can explain the phenomenon under this current study. So this theory is effective for discovering the participants' problem and how they can handle these circumstances. But also, as a researcher, I have to understand the problems experienced by the participants and how they deal with these problems. I'm not detached from this process. These are the factors influencing learners' health in primary school in our context, South African context, because it's influenced by various factors. But we have a health promotion program which creates a healthy school environment and promote general health and well-being of learners and staff, and address key barriers of learning, as well as barriers to health. However, according to UNICEF, there's been a gender inequalities, the persistence of race, disabilities, all those things, they affect the child development, malnutrition, and all those calamities related to gender-based violence. And these are the factors influencing the learner health and well-being in primary primary schools. The research methodology, this study initially was gonna be conducted in Grabo, Overberg district, with these 3 schools. Yeah, but yeah, because of the unforeseen circumstances, yeah, I've applied to the Western Cape Education Department to allow me to conduct this study with the schools, not far as to Krapo or Overberg district. So I've also identified the schools with the Metro North district here in Cape Town, the schools down there, the Durbanville, in the farms. How they said, okay, it's fine if I'm not gonna change the topic of the study, I can proceed. So the approach, the research approach, I'm gonna be using the participatory action research, which considers the participants and the researcher in facilitating the change to deliver services and support for all learners. The purposive selection of 21 teachers and health health professionals, and also I will indirectly involve the learners in this study through their teachers. The participatory action research cycle approach is illustrated like this picture here, the figure below. Because initially I'll have to approach the schools and establish advisory board. I will have to train the teachers into applying this Genesis School Health Index scorecard. I will have to investigate how is it work? Is it working with them, to investigate the application of this tool, and then I will have they will have to explore the value of the product, so that I could be able to have a perceived success of applying this tool.
Ms. Wandile,
So
I will have to.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Can you just summarize, please?
yeah, I will summarize now. Then this is the ethical consideration of which illustrates that the study has been already been accepted by the university with the permit from the Western Cape Education Department. For now, I haven't yet approached the schools at the moment, because the schools are busy now with the exams. Then I will have to start with the data collection process early in 2024. I'm not sure this is relevant, whether this is what I've been needing, or is it relevant for this presentation. But I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wandile. Questions will be asked after the next speaker.
Yes.
So thank you. You can unshare your screen.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Ms. Paul Erasmus. Take it away, Paul.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and thank you, Prof. I'm a facilitator and a researcher in the office of the DVC RNI. And this is our experience with workshops as a tool to create awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals. What is the SDGs is the question we are usually asked, and our explanation is that it is interconnected objectives seeking to achieve global peace and prosperity now and for future generations. We can use quality education as an example on how to use SDGs, because it can be used as a starting point of discussions to problems faced by societies to craft possible solutions. And as an example, if you look at quality education, it speaks about knowledge and skills acquired and needed to promote the Sustainable Development Goals according to the United Nations 2015 agenda, as it's put on there. And if we focus on target 4.7 of the quality education, it speaks to global citizen education, education for sustainable development, amongst others. So what is the requirement is of higher education institutions to be a vehicle to drive the SDGs. In that sense, we need to find effective ways to drive the SDGs. But first, we have to find effective ways to create the awareness of the SDGs. And literature and research has highlighted the challenges faced by higher education institutions to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. HEIs need to work with all stakeholders, who is the academics, your support staff, your students, and thus the need to engage stakeholders is very crucial. According to Ferguson and Roof, capacity building and training components are important with respect to enhancing the capabilities of educators for the delivery of quality and inclusive curricula and the utilization of inclusive pedagogy. So the approaches to capacity building in higher educations range from workshops to accredited courses. In this instance, we focus on workshops. Now, SDGs tend to be driven by academics through research, but it can be driven by students, support staff, and key stakeholders of higher education institutions. So, in the Office of the DVC Research and Innovation, we have found workshops have been identified as a common method in higher education institutions to create awareness, to promote change in knowledge, attitudes, and skills according to Staynet et al. Workshops can be used as effective faculty development tools that can provide professional development in the areas of teaching and learning, as well as research capabilities. So the incorporation of SDGs in academic research can be used as tools to address global and local challenges, combining participants from different faculties within the university, inclusive of external stakeholders, to provide the opportunity to address real-world sustainable issues. So UWC used workshops to explore and raise awareness of how the work of different stakeholders in the higher education space can contribute to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals and how to apply the information. So out of the Office of the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, we've been doing it since the beginning of last year. And so we took the feedback from 3 workshops as data collection for this study. The aim of the workshop was to assist participants in understanding their role in contributing to the SDG drive at this institution and the other institutions that invited us to come and share on how to work the SDGs into curriculum and how to bring it down to the level of the students, the academics, and the support staff at the institutions, which is still currently ongoing. So the content addressed by the workshops was aligned to the different SDGs, to the 5 Ps, which is people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. And the intention is to identify which SDG goals were addressed through the participants' research and their work? How can the participants further address the SDGs, and what would they use moving forward? And we did this at the hand of 4 themes. Theme 1, enhanced understanding of SDGs. So the implementation of SDGs requires access to knowledge for higher education leaders, as well as commitment and engagement. The 5 Ps function as a holistic approach for sustainable development, and participants must recognize the linkages between these components and take coordinated action in order to build a better future together. This requires us not to work in silos. Respondents were able to link the understanding of SDGs gained in the workshops to their work. Other respondents shared that the workshop had improved their application and understanding of SDGs. Theme 2 spoke to strengthening transdisciplinary learning and educational interactions. And this theme emerged when participants were asked how the SDG activity made them think about their work. One respondent was eager to share the SDGs with their postgraduate students and to collaborate across disciplines because of gaining understanding of the intention of the SDGs. For another, it brought home the understanding that current societal challenges are indeed interdisciplinary. Other respondents shared it made them aware of the interdependent and interlinked nature of the SDGs. And another respondent became aware that research is more than 1 or 2 SDG goals needed for her research, but the need for other role players to engage. Theme 3 spoke to aligning our work to SDGs or realizing the relevancy to SDGs. When the research is aligned with the SDGs, it can fight the most persistent societal challenges. The results of the workshop shows that participants were better enabled to align their research to SDGs after the workshops. One of the participants had never considered aligning his research as relevant to the SDGs prior to the workshop he attended. It also brought greater clarity as to how research touched on other SDGs. Theme 4 spoke to networking and collaboration. And it was understood after the workshops that networking and the importance of a leader to promote collaboration was one of the greatest needs. Learning to pitch a research idea to other professionals different from oneself with different professional interests was one important lesson learned during the workshops. To acquire the ability to identify people's strengths and use those strengths to collaborate. Most change can be effected when collaborating instead of competing or working in silos. The workshops also afforded the opportunity to network and collaborate. The conclusions that we drawn from these workshops, that workshops as a methodology can enhance the understanding of SDGs. This is imperative as building awareness and engaging stakeholders is a critical step towards the successful implementation of the SDGs. These workshops enabled researchers to have an astute understanding of SDGs and contributes to the advancement of the Sustainable Development Agenda. The successful implementation of the SDGs requires an approach that emphasizes collective efforts and leverage diverse knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. Workshops created an understanding amongst researchers that the SDGs are interconnected, meaning the success of one goal requires the interaction and relationship with other goals. The finding of this paper illustrates that the workshop methodology has proven to be effective in fostering and enhancing understanding of the significance of networking and collaboration amongst academics and researchers. That networking is a fundamental component of sustainable development as it facilitates the convergence of scientists, researchers, and practitioners to exchange knowledge, resources, and expertise in order to address shared challenges. By creating awareness through workshops and using the opportunity where participants can learn from each other and share knowledge, and in doing so, highlight the impact of research on reaching the SDG goals. Universities are key agents in the process of transformation towards sustainability. They must commit to promoting sustainable values and ensure there is an uptake from all stakeholders involved. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that very interesting presentation. So now we are going to the final Q&A. I'm just checking the chat for the Q&A. There's no questions yet, but I have a question for you, Paul. So what bottlenecks did you pick up when you implemented these methodologies? What bottlenecks did you pick up in sharing and creating awareness about the SDGs in your study group?
Thank you, Prof, for the question. I think the bottleneck for me personally while doing these workshops was not ignorance really, but the unawareness of the impact that the individual and collaborative studies and research can bring to bringing the agenda to fulfillment, the SDG agenda to fulfillment by 2030. I think we also started late in, having workshops to bring understanding, but I think we're on a good foot now by bringing awareness through the workshop. So we are, almost want to say, uncorking that bottleneck slowly but surely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is there a future vision of maybe also incorporating some of our students into the workshops?
We're already doing that.
Okay.
We're doing it on postgrad level. We're doing it through early researchers and mid-career academics, and the excitement of them leaving those workshops and taking it further into their classrooms or lecture halls. It's like, we're on par where that is concerned. Okay.
Thank you very much, Paul. Mzwandile, I've the same question to you that I have for Thandisile earlier. So when do you, or where do you see, or at what level can we bring the sustainable development teaching into the curriculum of the educators? If you can briefly just touch on that. So the educators, the teachers, so
Yes.
at what level or when do you think we should introduce this?
All right, Prof. I hear your question. In my own opinion, I think the teacher education also has to incorporate the health and well-being curriculum, particularly this tool, the Genesis School Health Index scorecard. It could be helpful as they are using the journals and portfolios. They can also make use of these tools. They can also be equipped while they are still in the universities or in the institutions, that they are gonna be faced with certain challenges with the school environment, the learners, and also physical school environment and school climate and so on. So therefore, I think it needs to be introduced within the teacher curriculum. Not only they must focus on their methods of teachings alone, but also they must also be aware that there are cognitive challenges with the learners. There are also social and emotionally, as well as school functioning challenges, which are affected by all these the social and emotionally functioning with the learners. So yes, it is for this project. I wish I could have piloted this document with the teachers in student teachers first, but for ethical purposes, I can't do that. I have to go to schools and have to work with the school communities as the research approach or design for my study allows for me to work closely with the teachers in school and in that environment they are working from.
Thank you very much, Mazandile. So thank you to all the speakers. I'm checking the Q&A again. And we will have roughly half an hour before the next session will start. The next session will start at 1. So I would like to give all of our attendees some time to get a break and to eat something before the next session starts. And I would like to thank all of the speakers for pitching up today and for leading the way in climate change and sustainable development, especially these goals. And I would like to leave another quote for the sustainable development session. The sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. I think that is very, very important. And this is to meet their own needs. And that is from Grow, Harlem, Brundtland. So we all know now that this is not going to go away. We know that we need to stick to these development goals, and we need to improve as South Africans. And also, we need to improve our climate health, which came out in the first session. So thank you very much to everyone. Enjoy the small break, and hopefully I see all of you in the next session. Thank you all.